Welcome to this week's lesson on what is a scientist. This week's lessons introduce us to what is a scientist. Next slide. What is a scientist? What do scientists do? How are scientists helpful to the community? How are scientists helpful to you? As a student, I would like to know if you can identify a scientist in your community. Think about it, use your thinking brain, and please tell Ms. Davenport what is a scientist and who is the scientist in your community. That scientist may even be you. In this lesson, we have some focus questions. Those focus questions ask us, how do scientists record, examine, and view items that they see? Last week I asked you about stars in the sky. Where do the stars come from? How can you find stars? Do the stars ever fall? If you're a scientist, you will know these answers. You will examine and think of ways to figure them out. Next slide. Definitions. We have some definitions to help us with understanding what a scientist is. One of our definitions is wind. Wind is moving air. Moving air. How does moving air help us? A scientist can tell us. Next slide. After the definitions, we have a short video. Please view the video and then look at the picture below. See if you can figure out the answers. Thank you for enjoying this short video and this short lesson on what is a scientist.
What is a Scientist by Barbara Lynn. Photographs by Carol Kraus. A scientist is a person who asks questions and tries different ways to answer them. Hannah wonders about fruits and vegetables. Are there this many peas in every pod? Asks Hannah. A scientist learns from her senses. Cami and Tiara play with a mixture of water and cornstarch. They try to decide if it is a liquid or solid. When I squeeze it, it feels like a solid, but it drips like a liquid, observes Tiara. A scientist notices details. Nate examines seeds inside vegetables. There are actually two kinds of seeds in the cucumber. The small ones are clear, discovers Nate. A scientist draws what she sees. Samantha shows how two liquids mix. The red drops beaded up inside the yellow liquid, observes Samantha. A scientist writes about what happens. Tim records his observation. The checker and pencil landed at the same time, but not the feather, writes Tim. A scientist makes comparisons by measuring. Amelia and Corey are measuring weights with the balance scale. Amelia, this side of the balance is higher because it is lighter, demonstrates Corey. A scientist must count exactly. Emily and Stuart count how many drops of water they can fit on a penny. We've put on 23 drops of water so far, says Emily. A scientist looks at objects carefully to decide how to sort. Zoe and her group organize the shoes and boots in different ways. You guys, I think this boot is longer, decides Zoe. A scientist designs experiments to test predictions. Jessie plants seeds at the top of one cup and the bottom of another. I think the seeds that I planted at the top will grow better than the ones at the bottom, predicts Jessie. A scientist experiments by trial and error. Nick uses a foam meat tray to make a flying object. I added a blob of clay and some paper clips on the front, and now my meat tray flies farther, explains Nick. A scientist thinks logically. Shivani explains how she learned about the compass directions. When I ride home at the end of the day, the sun is going down over there. So that must be west, figures Shivani. A scientist keeps trying over and over. Charlie and Stuart tried to build a tower as tall as possible. "Stuart, we finally got more than 10 to stay on," shouts Charlie. A scientist has fun. Jeff and Teresa experiment with water. "Let's see if we can fill up the tube through these holes," suggests Jeff. A scientist is a person who asks questions, learns from her senses, notices details, draws, writes, measures, counts, sorts, tests predictions, experiments, thinks logically, keeps trying, and has fun. That's what a scientist is.
After looking at the video, on the next slide you will see the worksheet. And on this worksheet it says identify the items that a scientist may use. I will start first. In the right corner you see a measuring tape. What do scientists use this measuring tape for? You guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and thank you for learning virtual with PTY.